What does it feel like when your life is being ruined, like you're destroying yourself? What are the things in our culture that ruin people's lives, and how can I make a difference in those things? Where do people feel alienated? Where do they feel lonely? I would have to say, if Jesus, you're my mentor on purpose, I'm going to adopt that motive and that outlook on life. Now, question for us. Is this where we are as Christians in America in 2025? Is this the average Christian? Jesus had this interaction with this guy in the New Testament by the name of Zach. I'm going to call him Zach. Luke 19. Zach was on that levels of purpose. Zach was very successful. He had a lot of money. And like a lot of successful people, he was also very lonely. And Jesus was coming by one day, and Zach heard that Jesus was coming by. He heard the reputation of Jesus, what Jesus did for people, the way Jesus spoke. And he was short, and he climbed up a tree and saw Jesus, and he said, "Jesus, come to my house." Jesus goes to his house. Zach owns up to the ways that he's oppressed people with his power and with his privilege in front of Jesus. And Jesus says something really profound. He says, "You know what? Today, salvation has come to this house." And then very famously, one of his statements of purpose in Luke 19:10, "For the Son of Man," referring to himself, "came to seek and save the lost." Again, we're trying to adopt the motives and outlook of our mentor on purpose. I fully understand that most of us, if you've been around church, you hear that word lost. And honestly, what we do with that word often is we use it as a category and a label for people that we think don't have it together. We need to return, though, to the root meaning of the word, which basically just means someone who's being destroyed. It's someone who's being ruined. A lost person is someone whose life is being ruined. Now, how do you know if your life is being ruined? Well, let's go back to that. Think about those levels of purpose. Someone whose life is being ruined, according to Jesus, would be anyone who stopped short of the line of greatness. Now, if we were to adopt the motives and outlook of Jesus, we would wake up tomorrow, I would wake up tomorrow, and I would say, I've got to find out what people do that makes their lives ruined. What does it feel like when your life is being ruined, like you're destroying yourself? What are the things in our culture that ruin people's lives, and how can I make a difference in those things? Where do people feel alienated? Where do they feel lonely? I would have to say, if Jesus, you're my mentor on purpose, I'm going to adopt that motive and that outlook on life. Now, question for us. Is this where we are as Christians in America in 2025? Is this the average Christian? I think that the average Christian would say something like, well, my life, I want to get a good job because, God has a purpose for me to find a job that's fulfilling, and so I want to get a job that's fulfilling, and I want to make some money, and I make money, and because I make money, I'm able to take a pretty sweet trip once or twice a year. I go to somewhere that's warm in the summer, in the winter, and then maybe I go skiing another time. My life's pretty good. I go to church. I'm part of a group, and that's kind of, and I'm generally speaking doing well. My life, I feel pretty good about my life. I feel pretty good about where my life's headed. Does it feel like, though, we're the group who's adopted the motives and outlook of the risen Lord Jesus Christ? That little description, does that sound like people we've adopted fully the motive and outlook of Jesus? I'm not sure. John Locke, who influenced our country greatly with his philosophy, he said that religion in the public sphere should be basically voluntary. It should be benign. It should be about your personal conscience, but it shouldn't infringe on anybody else's life. In other words, he said that religion's a nice thing that you do, but it really shouldn't impact other people other than your own personal interior world. This was only an extension of the way the Romans thought about religion, because there were many religions in the Roman Empire, and they called it the cultus privatus, meaning you could have your private religion as long as it didn't affect the public life of other people. And honestly, that's how most of us think about Christianity. Like, I go to church because it's for me and I feel better about myself. Francis Schaeffer, who was a thinker of another generation, he wrote several books. I'm a big fan of multiple books that he wrote. But in one of his books called Christian Manifesto, he's trying to paint the picture of how the church is going to succeed. And he said there are two things that if the church in America is focused on these two things, then the church of America is frankly doomed. And here's the two things he said. It's personal peace and affluence. Now, what's the end game if that's the motive and outlook that we adopt instead of the motive and outlook of Jesus? Well, it's a church that no longer has a purpose. A couple weeks ago, we were at another conference, a couple of us in New York City, and my wife and I had been there previously several years ago and found this great pizza place right off of Times Square called John's Pizzeria. I've got a couple pictures for you here just to show that we were indeed there. There's the slice of pizza. Not bad pizza if you're going to eat pizza. There's Nathan and Lauren downing this pizza. But we were in this building, and the first time we walked into this building, my wife and I looked and I went, this looks like a place that used to be a church. And it was. This was what was called the Gospel Tabernacle. It was built by a gentleman by the name of A.B. Simpson. Are you familiar with A.B. Simpson or A.W. Tozier maybe? From the Christian and Missionary Alliance denomination, a sister denomination. I've got a picture here of what that room looked like when it was the Gospel Tabernacle. A.B. Simpson led a bunch of working class people to Christ, and he brought them to his church, and they said, those people don't belong here. And he said, that's fine. I'm going to leave, and I'm going to take them with me. And he started and opened this Gospel Tabernacle in Times Square in New York City. And for decades, this was the mother church of the Christian and Missionary Alliance, which is still a mission organization in the world today. A.B. Simpson would have been like the Tim Keller or the Rick Warren of his generation. Massively influential. As things happened, he died, purpose waned, and the building became a place that people squatted. There was graffiti until John's Pizzeria. I want you to see these words of delight and hope from their website of John's Pizzeria. It's on the screen, but let me read it to you. You can see some pictures there from their website. But here's what the founder said about finding this building that had formerly been this place of influence and purpose. In 1995, Madeline Castellotti had a vision. Where frightened visitors saw adult shops and violence, Madeline saw potential. It was then she decided Times Square would be the home to the world-famous John's of Times Square. As she walked the crossroads of the world, she was looking for a location that was as unique as her pizza. After stumbling upon an abandoned church on West 44th Street, the former Gospel Tabernacle, where A.B. Simpson sent missionaries after missionary after missionary, where the homeless squatted and spray-painted gang signs were a part of the decor, Madeline instantly saw the beauty of this old Gospel Tabernacle church. It's beautiful. During her initial tour of the location, the perfectly intact stained glass ceiling caught her attention. It was made up of 8 parts, all equal in size, just like a pizza. Madeline Castellotti knew this would be home for her dream, the most unique pizzeria in the world. I'm not trying to make an argument for church buildings. I'm not. I am trying to make an argument for us always having purpose. I could see the day, this space, I've kind of thought about this space. I'm like, well, if we weren't here, what would this be? I think we could make a kind of sweet skate ramp here. This could be skate ramps all here. They just remove all the chairs, and the lobby would be like an arcade with some of those little claw machines. There could be bouncy houses in the gym. This could be a really sweet place that our city would love. They'd build the tax base. Come on. How do we keep from that happening? How does a person keep from that happening to them, where they lose their purpose and they lose their way? You have to adopt the motive and outlook of the person who is mentoring you on purpose. Adopt the motive and outlook of Jesus. Be people of purpose.